how do you find the right format for what you want to say in your content? That's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Hey, and welcome back to The Humble Pie. Nice to have you with me, where it's all about storytelling, learning, staying curious, staying human, and staying humble when it comes to building your audiences, building businesses, and life. So today I really want to dive into a particular topic that I'm quite passionate about and that I end up helping a lot of people when they're exploring this particular area, is finding the right format and medium and tone and style in their own content when it comes to producing content, whether that might be promotional or otherwise for their business, for themselves, for how they talk about their products, for how they might want to introduce what they do on a personal level, whatever it might be. I'm really excited about this because there's a couple little things along the way that I'll share about my own journey. But really what I want to leave you with is some questions, some thoughts, and some ideas on how and where to start when it comes to really nailing your niche or your particular medium, your preferred medium of content, how you're going to be creating it, questions to ask yourself when starting, and some thoughts to kind of round it all off as you proceed on your journey to creating content. Now, if you are no stranger to creating your own content already, have no fear. There's lots in what we're about to talk about that I think will definitely catch your ear and will be useful for you to either re-examine or perhaps think about again when it comes to perfecting or improving your content, making sure that it resonates with the particular audience, and also, most importantly, feels comfortable for you. So that's another thing that often I think we overlook. So diving straight into it then, when it comes to finding the right format. So this is something I was speaking to a friend about the other day, and we were talking a little bit about how to adapt a lot of his own coaching and massive amount of experience that he's had when it comes to face-to-face communication and the value that he brings on a interpersonal, in-person level. And some of the challenges he was finding in trying to put that into an audio and video sort of medium, because ultimately he wants to package that and put it into a course. And we were talking about the different forms of content and how often what you have to say and what you have to share that's going to be of value to somebody else needs to be expressed in the right way in terms of the medium that you are using. So in the wonderful, wacky internet world that we live in, it's given birth and given rise to so many different forms of content, so many different mediums, so many different creative ways of expressing how you feel or the value you have, or you're sharing your thoughts with a community, or sometimes even just with one particular person. And so when we look at the different formats, there's video, there's podcasts, there's creating and writing articles, there's blogs. I've also seen, many sub-niches, especially of writing as well, where, you have micro posts, micro blogs, whether it might be certain pieces of writing that you have on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook. And, those little short post descriptions themselves are a form of content, never mind the actual content it's accompanied with. There might be certain areas of content that you might be looking at or that you feel a particular affinity with when it comes to graphics or design or other creative media. There's obviously other forms of video as well. Look at what TikTok has done to the video kind of medium itself as well. That's just turned it on its head in a really exciting and interesting way. So a medium or a format, if you like, is a really useful starting point to think, well, how do I want to get into this, and how is the medium going to serve my purpose? But also a medium can be used as a starting point itself. What I mean by that is there are certain principles or guidelines when it comes to making the most of a particular medium, whether it might be writing or video or podcast. There's certain things that you can take from other people, especially if you like what they're doing, as a good guideline to get started in that medium. But that is not to say that that is the end of the road, that that's all you can do with it, because you just need to hop onto YouTube and see what people are doing with videos every day and how they are completely transforming the medium itself to something that's new and unique and creative and something that works for them. So a medium can help be a kind of a container, if you like, for carrying across what you need to say, but it can also be something that can be changed, that can be fundamentally redesigned to what you need it to be. So when you think of content that you want to create, value essentially that you're sharing, think of it as a flagship for your brand, your business, your personal brand, yourself, whatever it might be. And what you say and what you share with an audience or with one particular person, whomever the intended audience might ultimately be, what you say is a manifesto, it's a representation, it's a sample of who you are. So I really want this connection of content to be quite solidly established when you think about what it is and why you're creating content. It's not something that you're doing to just fill the airwaves, create more noise, and just push out more flotsam out there. That is really, I think, unfortunately, what too many people end up doing. But that's because there's no intention behind it. There's no understanding of the medium and understanding about what the content actually says and its purpose for why it's being created. So if you're thinking about why you're creating content, you really need to spend some time on that. And I've got a couple questions that I'm going to share with you on how to begin to answer that and what it might look like. Because once again, if you are just creating content for the sake of creating it, or just polluting the airwaves, if you like, or being another Me Too, then either you're probably going to find that you're going to have a harder time creating that content or coming up with good ideas, or you're going to find that the traction and the enthusiastic response that you're looking for is not going to be there. People are extremely savvy and knowing when it comes to determining whether somebody is authentic and has a pure intention or not when it comes to their content. So when you're thinking about this, and I acknowledge that we're getting quite deep quite early in on this, but it's important to really have a good understanding why you're creating content. And it's not because you want to sell products or you want to, be in front of people for no reason. It's because ultimately you need to have done some thinking on the following 3 questions. So I've got 3 questions here that I want you to ask yourself when you're starting, and I think is also going to be really valuable to return back to as often as you can. So the first question is, what's your value? What do you do? And this is important to not confuse this with what you might end up selling, or what your product might be, or the service that you're offering as a solution at the end of the road. That's not what you do. So an example of this might be a copywriter. A copywriter's job is to distill thoughts into words and have it make sense when they're reading, or when an audience or somebody who's visiting a website or reading a book or whatever it might be, for that idea to make sense in the best way when they're reading that. What they end up selling is their time. So it's an important sort of distinction to make when you're looking at what your value is and how ultimately that's going to carry through in the content that you create. So it's not what you sell, it's what you bring to the table. It's what you bring into the world. So the first question is, what's your value? What do you do? And what do you do, hopefully, that others find it hard to do or do as well? The second question is, who are you speaking to or with? Or in some cases, who might you be speaking for? Is there an audience? Who is the audience? So having a really good focused idea on who your audience is a great starting point, because anyone who says, I'm really talking to everybody, I've got everyone in mind, I've got the whole planet when I'm creating my content, anyone can enjoy it, anyone can relate to it. That, in a handful of cases, that might be applicable, but 95% of the time it's not. And even if it were, I don't think that it's a particularly good content strategy as far as an audience or the perspective of the viewer or the content digester, if you like, because nothing feels like it's meant for them. It doesn't feel like, if it's too broad, it won't feel like it's going to hit home. It's not going to feel like it's something relevant that was created for me, that's speaking to me. So when you're creating content, I always want you to think about your audience and who this is going to be for. Often when it comes to, I remember in my own earlier days, I was doing a radio internship and at a radio station in Cape Town, and a great piece of advice that one of the long-term presenters gave me when I was busy, just fooling around on the mic, was when you're speaking on the mic, when you're speaking to somebody, when you're presenting something, and you can't see them, like in this case, I can't see you, I can't hear you, but I'm still speaking to an audience. When you're doing that, envision that you're speaking to one person, one particular person. And so often you'll hear a mistake that a lot of young radio presenters or disc jockeys or whatever end up making is they'll refer to, you guys, or hey, everyone out there. And that's understandable because it feels like, we're just talking to a big faceless group of thousands of people who might be out there. But the problem is that you end up alienating a little bit, because really when someone on the other side is listening to that or watching it or reading your content, they are doing so in a solitary experience. They are doing it listening to you directly. They're on their own doing that. So that's important to keep in mind. And I want you to use the same sort of logic when you're thinking about your audience. Who are they? Where do they come from? What are their interests? What could their potential interest in you be? What is the value that you have to someone like them? So when you're speaking, when you're thinking about your content, when you're looking at the medium that you find yourself most comfortable with, think about how that might be boiled down to one person, one particular person, or one type of person. That's really going to be helpful. The other question is, which other formats of content, whether it might be videos or articles or news reading or podcasts, whatever it might be, do you find comes the most natural? So there's two different ways to think about this question. The first is, what format do I maybe already have some kind of natural experience or affinity with? So if you've done public speaking, if you've never had too many nerves about speaking to people or being able to present something and standing up and presenting something to people, then something like a video or podcast or doing something live, specifically like I'm doing now as an example, might be a natural way for you to get into creating content. That might be an avenue into it. The other way to think about it is, if you don't have a particular affinity with any form of content and you're starting out from bare bones for the first time now, then what forms of content do you often find yourself looking at or enjoying? Is it reading? Is it podcasts? Do you find you get the majority of your information or the majority of the kinds of, the time that you spend watching videos on YouTube or looking at blogs? It's a good starting point, because especially if you don't have an idea or don't have previous experience with finding your voice in content, then a good starting point is to see, well, what are the other people doing that I enjoy, that I might admire? What are they doing? And how might I be able to take a leaf out of their book? How can I perhaps relate to their experience or their format and begin to incorporate that into what will eventually be my content? So those are three questions to think about. The first is, what's your value? How can you think about what you do? And how can you maybe even write that down into a sentence or two? What do you do? How do you share and help other people? And remember that is not what you ultimately are selling. The second is, who is your audience? How can you distill who your audience is to a particular type of person, or even one particular person, and have them in mind when you're creating your content? And the third is, what type of content or what format comes the most naturally to you, whether that might be something you've done before, or if you haven't done any of that before, how can you look at perhaps other forms of content, other people, other influences, other areas or sources of content that you like and that you enjoy reading. And that normally is a good starting point for your particular journey in finding the right format. So maybe just as an aside, I can share why I like video content. Now, I enjoy writing. I enjoy creating podcasts, obviously. And I love creative media. I love design. I love digital. But video for me feels like a really kind of natural partner, if you like, for what I do and how I can share my value. Now, why I particularly like video is because it's visual, it's audible, so you've already got those two senses deeply involved in listening and enjoying the information transfer. It allows a certain really cool, interesting balance of being visceral and being creative and being cerebral. At the same time, you can do so much with it because you've got those sensory inputs. You've got the different ways of ingesting information when you're watching or listening to a video. And it also, I find, suits my fairly talkative style. So I'm sure you've noticed, I like talking. I enjoy having conversations with people, often helping people have conversations and helping them start conversations with others is the way, or one of the ways, that I provide value to others. And so it makes sense in a way that I use the same type of conversational creative format, if you like, as the vehicle for my content, as the vehicle for showing the world what my value is. So that's why I like video. That might resonate with you in a number of ways, but particularly for me, I enjoy that as a way to stay consistent with my content and stay, at least for me, visually interesting and challenging. There's always a challenge when it comes to creating a video or a podcast in this sense. There's always something that you've got to get right. It's not completely effortless every time. You've got to get the lighting right. You've got to get certain pieces of gear in the right kind of order. You've got to get it set up correctly. It's got to look a certain way. And over time, as you do it more and more, you begin to develop a style and you begin to care about the little details that make the big impressions. So that is particularly why I like video. You can use a lot of the same criteria to look at other forms of content, but that's a big one for me on why I like video and why often, arguably, it's the kind of format that that a lot of people enjoy, and that's really popular online as well. So here are a couple thoughts, some quick fire ideas and some tips to really get you started now that we've looked at some of those initial questions. We've looked at what might feel or what might come the most naturally to you and how to begin to actually get started once you've thought about that medium or that format of content that you'd like to begin creating, how to get started, how to find your own way of producing it, of staying consistent, and hopefully over time improving what you do and creating a style for yourself, creating your own signature, because that is super important. So the first is finding your own rhythm and cadence. So some people love to post every day. Some people might like to post something once a month, and there's no wrong or right way to do it. It's all dependent on the amount of time that it takes to produce your particular piece of content, how engaged you want your audience to be. Maybe it's something that makes sense to only post once every 2 weeks or once a month. But I think so often people aim to be consistent before they end up making it good. And there's a real lesson to learn in first finding out what is comfortable and what really works for you before you put it into this big conveyor belt and expect yourself to be ultimately consistent all the time. So take the time to really think about and be intentional with the rhythm and the cadence, the regularity with which you would like your content to be out there and enjoyed and engaged with online with your audiences. So that's an important one, because that also allows you to kind of work back and understand how much time you might need to be putting in every week, perhaps every day or every month, on the piece of content that you're producing, and allow yourself time to make mistakes, allow yourself time to do some research, to do things differently, to change it up every now and again, so that you can continue to get better and to experiment. The next is, when it comes to posting it and getting it out there, is don't be afraid to test publicly. Now, I do this, and I do this as much as I can, because I find that the opposite of what I just spoke about, trying to, get it right before you stay consistent, there's also the danger of sometimes spending too much time behind the line and aiming for it to be perfect before you send it out for the first time. A lot of people are like this as well. Now, the real danger there is that you don't have a chance to warm up an audience or warm up yourself for the kind of stories that you want to be telling and the kind of content that ultimately you're creating. Because if it's always going to be unpublished because, okay, I'm going to do that again, or no, I need to edit that, or I could do that one again, then it's never going to see the light of day, which means there's never going to be any engagement or testing or trying it out, right? So try to not get in your own way, and feel free to do what so many other people do, which is to publicly test, right? When you're sending something out, it's not the ultimate, kind of be all and end all of everything you ever wanted to say, and you're going to be judged from here on out on that one piece of content. The beautiful thing about what we have in the social media age, and the fact that you get so many different content creators, is that one day you put something out, the next day, most likely, people are going to forget about it. So don't worry too much about what people might think, because chances are they are having the same issue. They're having the same thoughts. So there's no way to lose if you're able to just get started, test, put something together, put it out there, and have that as the ultimate opportunity to improve, to get better, to get feedback. Also, when you're starting out, another thing to keep in mind is that, especially if you might have a couple references that you particularly enjoy, or perhaps there's a podcast out there or a video or a style of writing that in the beginning you find yourself copying or perhaps emulating quite closely, it's okay. It's okay to do that, because having output, creating something, is more important, once again, than feeling that you're just a copycat and ending up just, not publishing that, or, that's a little bit too close. Nah, I'm going to start again. Now, there's no rule on this. There's no copyright on a particular style. In fact, that is how internet culture and so many other micro niche forms of content get born in the first place. They rip off, or they reference, or they borrow, or they copy from others. So it's okay to do that. In fact, I'd almost encourage you to do that. So don't think that being a copycat, at least in the beginning, is something that should stop you from creating content or embracing a particular format. It's okay to do that. It's okay to copy. Go from there. Test it out, improve, do it again, copy it again, and keep going. That being said, I always want you to embrace a certain level of boldness when you are thinking about a particular story or an angle, or how to frame value in your own way when creating your content, because it's important to go where other people have not gone before, right? If you'll forgive the Star Trek sort of semi-reference there. How can you challenge yourself to say or do or go to different places where perhaps others have not gone before? How can you sort of stand out by maybe embracing a particular form of content, or a particular story, or a niche, or a format in a certain way that hasn't done before? Even even if it might feel strange, even if it might feel like some crazy experimentation, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you do it once and maybe, end up not coming back to it again. That's fine. You often find that people are really a lot more forgiving than they are critical, at least publicly, when it comes to seeing people have a go and have a try at creating their own content. So with that in mind, don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to be bold and to think differently and to try see things from a different angle and bring that into your content. Go where other people don't go. Be bold. And with that, another element that I'd like you to keep in mind is to be yourself. Now, it's easy to think that you have to act or you have to put on something or your writing has to take a certain form or your personality has to change if you're in front of the camera. That is absolute bullshit. It's not like that at all. In fact, like I said earlier, people see through that just like you might see through that in an instant. And you don't want that happening to you because A, it's going to skew the impression of you. B, people are going to see through it no matter how hard you try. In fact, the harder you try, the easier it is to see through it. And C, it's really just going to waste everybody's time. Yours, your audience's, everybody's. So don't be someone you're not. Just be yourself and allow yourself to be okay with exploring certain opinions, certain ideas, certain formats that you might not see elsewhere, because it means that there's a gap. There's a space for you to go and inhabit. There's a space for you to exploit, and that's a good thing. Second last is to beat the drum. So whatever you do, however much you might think that your content might suck in the beginning and that you're trying certain things, you're not getting the traction you see. Oh God, I really didn't like that piece. Oh God, my nose was too big in that video. Whatever it might be, you have to keep beating the drum, which means you have to stay consistent and focused and on point as well. So if you are an interior designer and you might be writing a series of articles about, changing trends in how people are, creating the layout for the space that they work in, or how these certain trends are being influenced by other industries or other verticals, whatever it might be, if that's your wheelhouse, and then suddenly you start to create a series about, how to make the perfect milkshake, or, suddenly talking about email marketing, that's going off point. And that makes it harder for your audience, who over time will begin to anticipate the content they can get from you and what they start to expect from you. If you start to go in a completely other direction, you're going to risk losing them. So stay consistent, not only in the regularity that you find, your rhythm and cadence, like we said, but stay consistent in the focus, the 2 or 3 things or 4 topics maximum that you keep coming back to. That kind of focus is going to really help you create a lasting, loyal audience in the long run. But you have to beat the drum. You have to stay consistent. You've got to stay on point with those topics. Try not to stray too far outside of that area, and keep going at it. Keep going. Keep your consistency up. And the last one is never stop checking out what's out there. Never stop reading and learning and improving and finding ways to improve your own craft. If there are new technologies to invest in when it comes to podcasting, if there's a writing course that's going to probably help you change the way that you approach your research, or how you write in the active voice, or whatever it might be, how you might take a course to help you, really nail that part of producing your content, or add to your knowledge in a way that makes you much more capable and experienced and comfortable in front of the microphone or behind the keyboard. Those are good things. Those are investments. Think of yourself as an asset that you should invest in. You are investing in yourself. Just like Warren Buffett always says, the best investment you can make is in yourself. So trust that with investments in yourself, whether it might be money or time or learning or reading, all of those is going to help you become better over time. Not worse, better. because you'll have the benefit of experience, of more learning and more listening that you will have done to improve what you do, or improve how you talk about your value, or even improve, in some cases, the value that you actually bring. And that itself is a great way of creating content as well, because there's always a story to find. There's always a story to tell. So if you look at these things and you try and stay consistent with how you're creating content, look at those 3 questions that we talked about: finding your format, having fun with it, and finding a rhythm, not being afraid to experiment, testing publicly, like we mentioned, and above all, being yourself. Be you. There's only one of you, right? And there's not enough time in your life to be somebody else. So be you and embrace that. I guarantee you that it'll not only be a lot easier to find the format that works for you and that feels comfortable for you, but also something that becomes an idea generator of content itself. You'll want to create more content. You'll want to be in that space, in that creative space where you're learning, you're experimenting, you're happy to do that. And all the while, an audience will begin to grow around you. And that is the best buddying of any type of content creator, any kind of content creation experience that you can hope for, whether you're starting out or whether you might want to be improving your online game. Thanks for listening. I hope that was useful. We covered quite a lot there. Do make sure that you follow the podcast on YouTube or on Spotify. Check out the links to my online presentation course, as well as the 5 digital communication skills PDF that's for free in the show notes. I know that'll make a difference when it comes to how you communicate and how you build rapport with virtual audiences. That's what I produce as content. That's what I like talking about. And really appreciate your time. I hope this was useful. We'll speak again soon. Thanks for jumping on the Humble Pie.